Trump issued a stern warning to leaders who tried to test the United States on multiple fronts at the same time. This Thursday, May 21st, 2026, China, Iran, Cuba, and Russia were trying to turn blackmail into leverage against the United States. Xi Jinping is trying to use Boeing chips and Taiwan as bargaining chips. The Iranian regime threatens to repeat asymmetric attacks with drones and allied groups. Cuba reacts in panic to the pressure against Raul Castro, talking about resistance, while Havana tries to pose as a victim after decades of suffocating its own people. Trump sees all of this as part of the same move. Dictatorial regimes and governments used to provoking the United States now feel that the bill has come due. And the question is, are these leaders really ready to face Trump, or are they just making noise because they know Washington is demanding a price again? Is Trump just reacting to provocations, or is he preparing a bigger response against China, Iran, Cuba, and Russia? Will Trump's warning stop this wave of threats, or will it reveal who really has the courage to pay the price of confrontation? I'll tell you all about that in a moment, but right now you'll want to subscribe to the channel to stay well informed with real-time information in the best journalistic quality you've ever seen with the credibility standard of Milson Alves. The reaction starts with China. Xi Jinping tries to use business deals, Boeing planes, Nvidia chips, and access to Beijing as bargaining chips to pressure the United States over Taiwan. Trump sees this move as a direct provocation. For him, Taiwan cannot become a bargaining chip in Beijing's hands because China only increases the pressure when it senses weakness on the other side. Elbridge Colby, the number 2 at the Department of Defense, became a target in this standoff. China tries to block or limit conversations with him because it knows he is tough against Chinese expansion in the Indo-Pacific. And that's where Trump turns this into a warning. No leader will tell the United States who can or cannot defend its interests. Taiwan comes into this scenario, showing exactly why Trump cannot back down. The island has been conducting military exercises with Abrams tanks, simulations against amphibious invasion, urban area defense, and troop movements on bridges and coastal regions. Taiwan is preparing because it knows that China is watching every sign of hesitation. Iran appears as another focus of warning. The regime threatens to repeat asymmetric tactics if the United States resumes military pressure. Tehran is betting on FPV drones, Shahed drones, militias in Iraq, Hezbollah, Houthis, and allied groups to target American and Israeli interests without engaging in a direct war. But this choice reveals Iran's own limits. The regime does not speak like a confident power. It speaks like a government that knows it can't face the United States on equal terms. Trump uses this point to turn the logic around. If Tehran needs militias, cheap drones, and indirect attacks, it's because it knows that a conventional war would be a disaster for the regime. The Iranian drone industry has also become a central concern. The assembly lines in Tehran, the cooperation with Russia, the use of the Caspian Sea as a connection route, and the lessons learned from the war in Ukraine show that the enemies of the United States are connecting their technologies. Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea form an axis of pressure against Washington. Trump looks at this and sees a chain of threats, not isolated cases. Putin had to get even closer to Xi Jinping because Russia felt the weight of this model. For Trump, the lesson is simple. Whoever dominates drones, intelligence, air defense, and rapid production gains power to exert pressure. That's why his warning is not just military, it's industrial, technological, and strategic. Cuba has become the most sensitive flashpoint in the Western Hemisphere. Miguel Díaz-Canel accuses Washington of creating a pretext to invade the island after the move against Raul Castro, the 94-year-old former Cuban leader. The Cuban dictatorship tries to present its own reaction as national defense, but Trump sees a different picture, an old, isolated, impoverished, and frightened regime, because it realized that the era of impunity may be coming to an end. The accusation involving 300 drones in Cuba ready to strike Florida has raised the alert in Washington. The information sparked debate, especially because local authorities said they did not have direct confirmation of this risk. Even so, political concern grew because Cuba is about 90 miles from the American coast. Trump knows that any threat coming from there cannot be treated as a joke. After years of seeing hostile regimes use their proximity as a political shield, the White House wants to make it clear that the Caribbean will not be a platform for intimidation against American citizens. The Cuban regime claims it's not a threat, yet discusses militias, resistance, sovereignty, and fighting to the end if there's intervention. This is the point that makes Trump furious. Havana complains about American pressure, but maintains a power structure that survives through fear, repression, and propaganda. Venezuela looms in the background as a model that Cuba fears. The method is well known. Investigate leaders, apply financial pressure, increase isolation, and cut off room for maneuver. In the Cuban case, the reaction is more nervous because the regime knows that the population is deeply worn out and now tries to use the people themselves as a shield. Canada also appeared in this crisis because Mark Carney defended the idea of a more stable, reliable, and independent Canada in an uncertain world. But this shows another problem. Allies have spent decades relying on American strength and now want to pose as a moral alternative when Washington demands responsibility. Trump doesn't see this as courage. He sees it as opportunism. When it comes to protection, many look to the United States. When it's time to pay the bill, they try to talk about autonomy. The Canadian speech about clean energy, trust, and markets opens up another part of Trump's warning. The White House wants to prevent allies from using fancy words to escape the harsh reality of security. The American defense budget serves as a symbol of this difference. While adversaries talk about doing more with cheap weapons, Trump looks at a military machine that could surpass $1 trillion and understands that the problem is not a lack of resources. For him, cheap drones can cause damage, but they don't replace global command, naval fleet, satellites, aircraft carriers, intelligence, industry, and the ability to respond in multiple regions at the same time. The leaders who threaten Trump know this. That's why they resort to asymmetric warfare. Iran uses militias, China uses trade and Taiwan. Cuba uses propaganda and fear of invasion. Russia uses its alliance with Beijing and support from hostile regimes. Each one tries to attack around the edges. Trump responds by targeting the center. Whoever challenges American interests will face sanctions, military pressure, technological blockade, diplomatic isolation, and reinforced support for strategic allies. Israel understands this logic better than many Western governments. The United States has been surrounded for years by groups that use cheap rockets, tunnels, drones, and indirect attacks to wear down a far superior military force. Taiwan observes the same formula in the Indo-Pacific. Gulf nations also look at Iran with this concern. It's not just about large-scale war. It's about preventing smaller and more aggressive regimes from turning constant provocation into an accepted routine. Trump wants to put an end to this routine. His fury doesn't come from lack of control, but from the perception that hostile leaders interpreted patience as weakness. Now, reaction is back at the center of the game. And leaders who used to talk tough are starting to measure every step because the White House has made it clear that provocation, blackmail, and threats will not be treated as diplomacy. I'm Milson Alves, Global, and my purpose is to keep you accurately informed every day. The news links are in the video description. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves community.